Hello, and in this video we're now going to explore how you write a full mark response for section B of paper 1 for the EDEXCEL English Literature A2 qualification. We've already explored how you should be planning this answer, we've already explored what the mark scheme dictates we need to make sure we include in our response, but how do we write a full mark response? So here's a question, not based necessarily on a text that you have been studying, but obviously the aspects of this are exactly the same. Explore how Sheriff presents Stanhope as a character much changed due to the nature of war. You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors. So how do I write this then? So my argument should be immediately stated in my introduction. I should obviously, because we're thinking about our bullet points here and using context, link some of that in. We also want to be starting to think about what our central focus is going to be. Well, our main body is exactly what we've been used to, so we've already talked about how we would do this in our planning. One aspect which proves that we're correct, making sure in our main body, is this PE, PIE, PEA, whatever it is you're used to, some variation of that in order to achieve full marks. And again, our conclusion, refer back to your question, making sure you're discussing why it is you're correct. You may also want to talk about which aspects you felt was most important and why. Here's the question once more. The character of Stanhope is unquestionably one of many dimensions. On the outside, he is tough, almost emotionless alcoholic who appears to have been severely affected by the war. However, as we delve deeper into the character, we see a young, fragile man, admittedly aged by war, but still with strong elements of his own self. The change in Stanhope we see, I believe, is merely a coping mechanism used to deal with the harsh realities of war, aspect of context. It would be an impassive statement to assume that the war had little effect on people. Instead, I feel the effects of war are similar to an illness. It can make people feel entirely different due to circumstances, but underneath, they are still the same person. Although at times it appears elements of the morality and the human emotion is lost in Stanhope, it is clear that the young Stanhope never truly disappears. At the end of the play, Stanhope returns to himself as Riley dies, and indeed throughout the play when Hibbert is at his most vulnerable, and the following scene after Osborne dies, we see Stanhope in an entirely different light, a caring, sentimental man who does care about his men. Before we even meet Stanhope, we recognise his strong addiction to alcohol through the language of the other characters. Hardy opens up the debate about Stanhope in the first scene when talking to Osborne, when his comment, drinking like a fish as usual. The tone is one of disapproval and pity for Stanhope, causing the audience to think he is not a strong character suitable for commanding a battalion. The use of the simile fish suggests that he drinks a lot, but also as an insult, as it is not a term associated with resilience, strength or authority. Instead, we get the image of a weak, limp and flopping character, raising suspicion as to whether Stanhope can cope with the role. The clause, as usual, on the end is a dependent one, as if alcohol is added into Stanhope's personality. It reflects the idea that the war has made drinking usual for Stanhope, so much so that it is almost dismissive in tone. Highlighted in changing Stanhope even further is the respect Riley credits him on the topic of alcohol when talking to Osborne. He says, "I remember once at school he caught some chaps in study with a bottle of whiskey. Lord, the roof nearly blew off." Here the audience is given a comparison from the present Stanhope and the character of Stanhope before the war commenced. Riley mentioned it was at school. The audience is given a grim reminder that both of the characters are indeed very young and vulnerable, perhaps allowing us to open up in acceptance of the cruel character Stanhope often seems, in a knowledge that he is not always that way. The exclamation of Lord seems emphatic, adding dynamics and shock to the story as well as adding respect from Riley. Lord also separates the narration of the tale from the action of Stanhope. At this point, we are unsure as to whether Stanhope joined in, drank the bottle, or, in fact, blew the roof off. This adds surprise for the audience and a memorable line that Stanhope was a very different man before the war. In the story Riley tells, we see Stanhope as a man of action, standing up for what he believes in and holding strong views. This allows the audience to see why Riley gives him such respect and also allows for appreciating Stanhope as a character, while gaining respect for the rest of the play and hoping he will return back to his old character. Then you can see we continue in that. There's my structured form of language being explored. I must make sure I include more context here, so I can be looking here at the psychological impacts that war has had, the idea of shell shock and the way in which men were seen to cope. All those sort of things would be relevant. Second paragraph is there to give you further ideas as to how you can include your answer. So obviously pause this and make sure you read through Our conclusion? On the outside, Stanhope may be seen as an unpleasant character, completely transformed by war. However, as we look closer, we can see that there are still elements of his character very much alive, such as his need for friendship and his leadership skills. There are also other qualities we see hints of, such as a caring nature, that are possibly hidden more deeply as a way of coping. War may bring out the undesirable traits in a person due to the brutality of the situation, but for the character of Riley, we see that traits of violence and anger have always been present in Stanhope, and his personality is not entirely changed, just unbalanced. You could argue that this is through the death of his friends that Stanhope returns to his true self. War was responsible for Stanhope turning to alcohol, which no doubt brought a change in his personality, but it was war which was also responsible for bringing him back to his true self. Thank you. Make sure you're practicing, make sure you're revising, and good luck.